I'm Stephen Henry Madoff. I'm the founding chair of the Master's Program in Curatorial Practice at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And the program is a 2-year program that trains curators in every aspect of curatorial practice. And as part of the program, each week I host the Curatorial Roundtable for distinguished, interesting curators and directors from around the world. And today I'm happy to say that Zhou Yingpeng has joined me. And I'll just read a little bio for Zhou. Zhou Yingpeng, a Taiwanese independent curator based in Mexico City, runs Vernacular Institute, which she took over from Kit Hammonds in 2017. Her multifaceted practice encompasses curatorial, editorial, and cinematic ventures aiming to expand artistic boundaries and challenge conventional narratives. With a focus on crafting a dynamic space within Vernacular Institute, Zhou's projects encourage experimentation and challenge institutional norms. Through her curatorial discourse, performative approaches, and collaborative programming, she confronts pressing social and political issues, including labor, borders, feminism, and resistance. Vernacular Institute serves as a platform for unconventional ideas, fostering collaborative energy among participating artists. Originally rooted in Taipei, the Institute's relocation to Mexico City underscores its role as a bridge between Latin American and Asian artists, facilitating cross-cultural exchange and understanding. And with that, welcome, Zhou. I'm handing it over to you. One thing I should say to the audience, so Zhou will speak for 45 or 50 minutes, at which point, at the bottom of your screen in Q&A, you can post a comment or question for Zhou. So, Zhou, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank for you and your student to have me today this morning. And I'm really glad to share Vernacular, which is very much my personal curatorial practice I'm going to talk about. So I'm trying to actually go through from the background of the vernacular brief history, and then to slowly go into few major practice I find they are kind of meaningful to me. So I will start it to slowly drawing a landscape. And I find I like to use this turn the landscape as my curatorial look. And because I find everyone has a very individual and particular approach to curatorial adventure. And for myself, I will have to say I am pretty much lack of the academic background for a curatorial training. My first degree was finished in Taiwan, and it was in the mass communication, particularly in documentary filmmaking. And then I went to London to study fine art, and particularly in the poetry, creative writing, and video work. And then from that, I extended the curatorial study as a certificate practice, but not a degree. And then I think when I started as a curator job in my career is probably when I was 30. I think it's not too young, not too old, but kind of in a good balance. And I am trained as a curator in a curator job in an independent space called Taipei Contemporary Art Center in Taipei. And it is pretty much where I took my curatorial course from working with artistic director from the art center, different of them, and different curators, and many different artists and writers from the board member from the art center. And I have to say TCAC, Taipei Contemporary Art Center, is where I was trained as a curator, as a very fundamental place for myself until I moved to Mexico City and took over Vernacular Institute. So here I started with Vernacular Institute. The first question I put here, and I think Stephen has already talked about who I am. And where is vernacular is always an interesting question I want to bring to people, because that is actually most of people who knows, who doesn't knows, actually does not know about. Vernacular is actually in my home, my house, or the other way to say, I live inside vernacular. And since vernacular was funded by KIT, and then I took over vernacular, I started giving vernacular a physical space when in Mexico City, which is started in the living room. So I will start talking about the core, the initial exercise about vernacular and how it started developing its editorial and curatorial with the local community and through the multiple exchange projects. And here this slogan, vernacular is a curatorial verb in the tone of contemporary art, I consider as a title for today. And I like to use the verb to describe the movement of my curatorial practice and vernacular practice. It's just the verb itself, it has this action, is originated from the concept of language, which is also the core concept of vernacular program. And so here is a short statement about what vernacular is. A curatorial house that generates, presents, exchange ideas, running against institution, discourse. Vernacular is an involving space for experimentation transformed by each artist's engagement. Projects that emphasize performative approaches and collaborative programming are framed by a curatorial narrative of how art responds to our present-day social-political concepts, including labor, border, feminism, focus, and resistance. And here I will start it with a very first major project at Vernacular Institute right before me. The editorial is the one of the first project Vernacular did in Taipei, is part of the, let me see here. It is in 2016, not December, in Taipei Fine Art Museum as part of the Taipei Biennial. And it is a 2 days book fair and conference and screening and performance. And I will quickly drop this project. It has the idea about how vernacular was birthed. Vernacular was birthed as a continuing project from Kit Harmon's previous 10-year project called Publish and Be Damned. So vernacular inherited a very strong idea about the editorial, which always has a focus about of artist publishing, artists make books, and independent publishing. this type of the media and the works. And so the editorial, this project is also a research lead inquiry into the expanding role and network of independent contemporary art publishers in Asia and their international impact through a curated series of public events and discussions within these 2 days. In the photo, you could see one of the bottom right one is the speaker. It was Farid from Rugrupa, was talking about the publishing house and the radio program. That was 2016. And then I continue this editorial exercise to Mexico as the very first project I did since relocated in Mexico. I commissioned a Taiwanese artist, Qin Zhender, to make a Lengua Negra box set special edition. Lengua Negra in English is black tongue. It means black language. And black language is actually the interpretation of vernacular in Chinese. In Chinese, there is no any word could really translate it or interpret it what vernacular is. And if have to translate it literally, it is actually to be called white language or spoken language. And I kind of playing this, the idea of language and playing this kind of gap of translation. So I call it black language. So vernacular, I also started running, here I did not put any image in the PowerPoint, but I can just talk about that. Apart from commissioning this book set special edition, in the same year, in 2016, in my living room, I was running a series of the book club, and they all call Black Language Book Club series events. For example, some reading performance and some writing workshops. So here is the vernacular between 2017 to 2019, when everything is happening in the living room. And here I mentioned about one of the book club, Black Language Book Club event in that year, in the winter of 2017, is a reading performance by Mexican artist Isaac Olvera in the right bottom image. And what you could see is the left top image is the film production picture. And I will talk about that film. Is the commission work with the Taiwanese artist Bao Li to make her first made film, Buenos Dias Mujeres. I will go through. This is the first house, vernacular house in Mexico City, and the living room is in the ground floor. And I used the first floor, which is the red room. That is the book club and also the library in that time. And this is one of the living room when after the next day morning, after one of the opening and the screening event. I remember in that time, everything has to moving around for the event. And because the limited of the usage of the space for vernacular, I kind of like living, working, and presenting projects in the same room. And this is the next day morning. Normally, I have to be having coffee and breakfast in the empty living room without chair without sofa. I think I did not have sofa at that time, but just a simple chair and tables. Normally, I have to move them out of the house to clear the space for screening for the performance. And I will show you more. And from here, I will start showing the image of the Vernacular Institute in the current venue, which is a house in Santa Maria la Ribera in Mexico City in the north area. And this is the outside of the house. It's one of the quite a good maintained condition mansion. And this house has been, I think, 100 years old. And before it was vernacular, it was used as a gallery for a couple years. And before that, it was a school, like an elementary school for many years. So later I will show some photos. So in this, here I give an idea of the structure of what Vernacular currently has been working on with the program. And the term I used earlier, it has an in-house and open house, is because right at the moment, I try to use the most of the space in terms of this big building. So apart from I myself curating most of the program, directing most of the projects, I also open house for experimental musician, free jazz events, or the jam or sound performance, sometimes choreography performance, or the theater-based work, which could be happening in our outdoor garden space. And I might come with more photos about this later. So this is the current space, and it has multiple a diversity of the different events and type of the project. One of these here in the image is the memory wall, which is a film screening, a weekend film screening curated by Asha Bukohitsky. And it is actually a collaboration with memory screening marathon, which is a screening project based in LA. And in this screening project, alongside with this screening project, we also create a reading room with a small selection of the book from our library. And this is another meditation performance made by Sophie Dupont, and it's in the November 2022. And it's actually one of the many choreography and body movement exercise being happening in the garden space. And this is a 3 days writing workshop initiated by a Taiwanese curator, Esther Lu, and with two other Taiwanese artists, Ho Yi-ting. And in this writing workshop, Munso, it resulting in a live exhibition listing for a weekend. And during this writing workshop, we invited local Mexico City-based writer, artist, researcher, and who, I think so. And then it was like a 3 days, including the visiting curatorial team. They have their 10 days field research. And this 10 days field research related to the Panos and research project I will talk about later. And this is actually our event-based Scopios bar. And this is the bar is also our daily kitchen place for running and for the social gathering during the events. So here I will talk about, I will start talking about the project I want to introduce, the curatorial part. And I think I select like 5 different projects, and most of them is a recent project happened from the last 2 years. And I want to first talk about this map. It's actually kind of, I keep changing about this map all the time. And this is a map is always updating, but it's kind of a keyword to keep myself always thinking about what I have done and what vernacular have achieved and what is the future for us to go into. And in the core, in the center is a word and word, which is I care the most, is about our present burning issue we should actually talk about. So I do believe art should have a strong voice to echo and to speak for the things which we should actually focus at the moment existing in our society. I don't want to talk about, I don't want to just referring to anything like the crisis or problem, but I want to talk about it something, it could be the everyday issues. We do acknowledge it exists, but they're not kind of ignoring the issues is actually being with us. And this is something I want to put in the center of my program. So from related subject, I most of the time work with like labor, border, immigration, families, resisting, all this kind of thing, environment, eco response, all this is like, it could be taking a soft angle to talk through everything, or it could take an alternative voices to response. Sometimes I believe curatorial is a tool for a better communication for our everyday exercise when we live with each other, when we live with other human beings, or when we live with other beings, living with our plants in our garden, you know. We only communicate with each other, communicate with the earth, with the world, with the universe. And then I started taking a very subtle observation to look at what kind of elements I'm interested in and what kind of thing I can put into my curatorial practice. And most of those is actually also, of course, from my research of the artist project and artist practice, and also my research about the subject I'm interested in. But I always like to I like to mapping. I don't really, when I do curatorial work, I don't have a very straightforward time-based or a linear. I like to go things like a mapping, But this kind of mapping could be running around, and every time the new mapping come out with a new different look. So this map is one of the example. It looks always a bit abstract, but it actually kind of construct what at the moment, like in the first season in 2024, what vernacular is focusing on. And the space is always important, is the nature of the architect of vernacular building, how the project could be very site-specific, and what kind of performance could be very site-specific. And when I say architecture, it doesn't mean the layout of the space, but it means we have a family living here, 2 cats, a couple. We have a garden, we have a house, we have a kitchen, we have an exhibition space. And this kind of site and local, this kind of internal, external, this kind of hosting and visiting, viewing, and in-house and open house, this kind of boundary could actually be twisted and blurred. And I really like how this kind of boundary is actually, it doesn't have to be every project is always in a white cube space, but it could be in a space which, for example, like a kitchen. Our kitchen could be a reading performance stage, and our white cube exhibition space could actually be a temporary living room or a temporary kitchen, for this kind of exchange and playful with the layout of the nature of the architecture here. And this is also related to the alternation, this kind of alternative thinking. And then the language part from the beginning I actually mentioned about is always the crucial point in vernacular from the very beginning, when Vernacular Institute was started with a series of the editorial project, and now it's into more curatorial project. And I have been writing a lot of poetry to respond to artist exhibition or artist project proposal. And I always like to have a micro reading as an introduction in the opening, to be able to welcome and introduce a work in a soft, and also introduce a work with a very personal note, but not a general idea. The general idea could be generated by each individual reader, the viewer. And here, poetry, speech, writing, narrative, translation, and brief. And then the movement. The body is always important in most of the project, which it contain with a lot of project. I would really like it is a time-based work. And also a lot of project I'm interested to develop with the artist is also a life. A kind of like the presentation, it has to be live. And here it has the element of act, voice, collective, community, and society. And then I will go to the first project I'm going to talk about, which is this is the title of the project, ¿Cómo están de ausentes las cosas queridas? This actually, the English is how dear things are absent. How dear things are absent is a project made by Working Hard, an artistic research residency. Working Hard is an artist duo, Taiwanese artist duo based in Berlin. They are formed by She Wenying and Guo Yuping. And in this project, their research subject is about Café Here you could see the definition of the Café Here it shows it's the very first research we found out is Café is one of the 40s Mexican film. But Café is a very interesting social, society, environmental mark. And I think it started in Mexico early is probably back to the late of 30s, 40s. And then Café de Chino is a type of the local restaurant. It got very popular in Mexico around 50 to 70. And then after 70, this type of Café de Chino is kind of disappearing. And when we were researching about Café de Chino, its original idea was looking at the Chinese immigration community and the Chinese immigrant history in Mexico. And this is one of the route. The other to talk about Chinese immigrant history in Mexico will be in Mexicali. And this is something I haven't go very deep, so I'm not going to talk about that today. And Café de Chino, this project is started with a field research. And we were looking for most of the archival document. And this is one of the archival image. It shows how much it shows in the 30s, it costs almost only 50 cents for a cup of coffee and a Chinese bread. They called it the pan de chino. And this is how cheap it used to be. And the Chinese operated cafe at that time, they normally opens around the clock for like 24 hours. So most of the people will be students and the factory workers. And most of Café de Chino is around in the center of the historical town in Mexico City. And in this project, I was invited those two artists in 2022 to arrive in Mexico City to do this research. And it started in the summertime. They arrived, and we have, this is just a handy note about how many Café de Chino, like the famous and the one we could find in the old films, in the archival images, in the archival research. But in reality, after we done the field research, I think it was only 10 to 15% of the Café de Chino still exist at the currently in Mexico City, because after the pandemic, it was almost the last. After pandemic, it was almost impossible to survive. So in this is kind of the note of the research material. And here is this is the photo of the visiting of the Café de Chino. The first one we visit is called La Nacional, and the second one is Allende. They're both in the historical area in Mexico City. And most of them have been running through the fourth generation so far. And most of the Chinese owner, they do not speak Chinese or write in Chinese, But this old guy is a Mr. Cho. He has been learning Mandarin writing after he retired. And this is one of the very interesting type of the I will show this photo because it's an interesting thing I learned from the Mexican friends. They told me the memory about Cafe de Chino is about how they pull in the milk. And this is also something we use this kind of collective memory to address as a crucial element to make an installation for the exhibition after the field research. Because a lot of Mexican people actually told me they thought most of the Chinese people drinking coffee in this way, because that is what they remember is a cafe de chino, and this is a Chinese style coffee. And after the 2 months field research, and the artists do working hard, they created a site-specific installation to respond to give a result of a temporary result of the research. And the idea about the site-specific installation to be able to present their research is because they are actually, we talk about what is an interesting way if we want to share the research material with our audience, apart from showing the image and translating all the interviewed dialogue with the Cafe de Chino families. What else we could do to actually visualize the research in an exhibition space for people to visit, for people to be in a space thinking about what is the idea about the immigration history and how we can write and how we can talk about immigration history, specifically when this is such a small percentage in the Mexican society from the Chinese immigration. So the idea the exhibition kind of waved with the idea, which it comes from the very beginning of Cafe de Chino, is such a scenario. Create that kind of scenario is almost like in from the 30s, 40s, when the very beginning of modernism in Mexico City, how people can eat in a modern way, but in the economic and bargain style. And we also talk about the style is a very important in this collective memory. When most of people think about Cafe de Chino, they have a really strong image. They don't even remember the taste of the food or the taste of the cafe. So then artists working hard, they decide to create almost like a film set in the exhibition space. So all this you could see is a film set. It's actually the chair cannot be sit. And we borrowed some props from the Cafe de Chino, from the restaurant. And this, from the image, you could see this is almost the copy. The installation is a copy of the first archival image I showed here, this one on the table. And then this is the installation shot in the space. We try to make the Cafe de Chino and to recreate the space, to give it is something very abstract. And this is also something the exhibition space is almost the viewer could only be seen. This is the shot from inside, which is for the exhibition viewer visitor. They cannot enter. They can only enter and see the film from the other side, where in the image is the people standing there. And then the next project I'm going to talk about is Panos Miklos. Here is project. Panos Miklos and is, let me read their introduction here. Panos Miklos is an artist collective based in Mexico City, formed by Mariana Mañón and Manolo La Rosa. And this collective has been focusing on the subject about black water, the issue of the water in Mexico City. And Mexico has always a serious issue about the water, specific about recently last week we had the news is the water actually only has 150 days left for use. So by end of June, probably the city is totally run out of water. But this kind of thing is continuing existing in Mexico City. And this collective, they have been like making the visible presentation and also a long-term research about how to develop a transdisciplinary collaboration with the local community and local researcher to talk about this black water issue and building the bridge with the field research, such as the landscape architecture, the democratic design, and social drives to allow them to collect the subject materials. And the exhibition at Vernacular, I have here, I'm going to skip this point. This is the point I wrote, include in the creative essay, reflective essay for Panos Miklos research. And here you could see, this is the map of Panos Miklos research. In the map, a lot of the star is the Mexico City. And here it shows it's like an hour and a half way to arrive in Do. And Do, this is the mark on the right, on the red dot. And Do is where all the storage, the dirty used water to be abandoned from the Mexico City to the north. And during the field research, we went to this place, and it has the very, very physical image in front of our eyes is actually, the water is not that black. It's quite bluish green. It has no that smelly. I think more likely to describe is a taxi water beyond the dirty. And all this field research has been going on through the collective and the other artist, Dalenko Chima. And this image is the installation view of their exhibition, which is the reverse of the shadow is not the reflection in the water. This exhibition in 2022 in May. And in this image, you could see is the installation work, plastic binding. Plastic binding is very interesting. If you go a little bit close, yeah, you could see on the earth, it is the ceramic work. But all the ceramic work is actually created by the microplastic artists collected from the Blackwater area. The second installation work in this exhibition is called water writing. Water writing is one of the artist's handmade machine. And this machine, I would simply say the machine has a cable connecting to the toilet and the shower and the sink tap. So whenever it is a water writing is actually a writing machine. And this writing drawing machine, the cable connected to all the taps. And whenever the toilet is used, and there is a water being used, it connected to the machine and the machine will started writing and drawing. So I think we run out quite many of row of the paper for the drawing, and that is related to the duration, the 6 weeks duration of the exhibition, how much water has been used in the vernacular building. And of course, you could actually see the row of the paper. It has been very, very factual, because when a house has no events, you will see it's almost the line for really long line until the next event. And sometimes the event is like a concert, and it's like a really packed event with 80 people here constantly using the toilet, and the paper will be broken because it's just too much intensive drawing and the inks going on. And after this, I think this is the closing event for this exhibition. And this closing event is actually a barbacoa dinner. A barbacoa dinner is a pre-Spanish pre-Spanish cooking. And it is, I don't know how to say, it's in this image, the idea about presenting the barbacoa cooking and barbacoa dinner as a closing event for this exhibition is related to this exhibition. Apart from talking about the Blackwater issue, it actually also talking about, let me see, talking about the disappearing traditional cooking in the Nahuatl cultural area. And in this picture, you could see is actually, it has the number of right next to the sheet. That is when the artists were choosing which baby lamb should buy and to use for the dinner. And that was totally I think the artists, they all from trying to follow in this traditional cooking and traditional way of food making. And this kind of traditional way of food making is something artists has been researched also, because in the Blackwater area, this is the very polluted Blackwater area is in the north of the Mexico state called the state of Hidalgo. And they have a very strong indigenous cultural and dining tradition. And this kind of barbacoa is one of the symbolic eating and cooking tradition. And to do this is actually a symbolic way to actually rethinking and revisiting how the environment affect nowadays the way how we grow the vegetable and how we how we eat and how we cook. Because in most of the area in Hidalgo, they have been suffering the short of the clean water, but have a lot of water has to be used, which is a polluted water for agriculture. And the resulting of the farming is actually the fruit and vegetable selling back to the Mexico City. And this is a kind of a circulation of talking about the water coming from where, and the water dumped to somewhere, and then the food and the eat and this all the capitalism circulation has been going on. So yeah. And this is a year after this project by the installation work, water writing, and the ceramic work, plastic finding. These two works has been touring to the Museo Marco in Monterrey in a year after. And here I have a written poetry to be reflecting to the exhibition in the museum. The next project I will talk about is a film production. Taiwanese artist Bao Li has been working with me at Vernacular for the two films. The first film is called Buenos Dias Mujeres, which I already skipped. It's a film she made in 2019, and the subject is about the femicide. And she has been studied around the subject about the violence in our society. And she's always want to talk about how we could respond the violent happenings in our daily life. So in this filmmaking, it is a very, very special, is because the artist has been always working with a non-actor people. So in all this film production, she was in Mexico City with me, writing her script and looking for the proper people, character. So in the film, I'm going to show in a film which I will carry on talking. This film this is the film she made to respond to the femicide subject. And then carry on in 2021, she came to Mexico to make the second. The second film she made is called I Made Those from Millions of Years. And this is the film she actually also surrounded with the history of violent consequence in the merging of the victim and the merging of the environmental element, and focusing on the sociological investigation of the violent and complex political situations. And in this film, she actually made a script which has also working with the character she had worked 2 years ago in the film Buenos Dias Mujeres. And in Buenos Dias Mujeres, in a very experimental methodology from the artist to work with, is to actually she create a script action script. And this action script is very simple, but very straightforward, direct, and very experimental, which means all the non-actors, they didn't know about what they will have to do in front of the camera. all the non-actors. They are including writers, neighbors, 20 security guards we hired from the next door building, and a performance artist, a live art artist. And then we gathering them, we invite them to be part of the film, and we explain to them about the concept of the project, and also what is the idea, what we want to talk about, the violence, and how we want to talk about the violence. But we want most of the character to be an observer in the film, but not acting. So they understand the idea. For the shooting day, the methodology is the way of the producing is I will have to text the action script to the character's phone a minute before they enter the room. And the shooting was in the previous house, was in the bedroom, in the living room. And most of them will be received and then standing, following the action script to be standing or watching the other character, or pick up the chips to eating and writing down the notes. This kind of very simple gesture, but somehow is very experimental because there are so many trust, and so much about the trust, about the comfortable, about the boundary of the social class, which is we found is the biggest challenge when we were doing the film production in Mexico City for a Taiwanese curator and Taiwanese artist, which we have to rely on what the local assistant and producer to tell us how to tell people to do things, how to actually read their response, read their reactions. And so it has a lot of details going on through this kind of production, and all the experimental experiences and experimentations through the film production. It has been translated into the pieces of the writing between myself and the artist. Yeah, but I could actually probably share more text after the talk. Yeah. I think I lost my PDF here, but maybe I should stop here. And if there are more questions related to something else, I could vote more.
Yeah, let's I had noted that it's the time to ask questions. Are there any from anyone? Since it's 10:03, if not, what we'll do is we'll just jump into the second session just with the students. So let's give it a minute. Anyone like to ask Joe anything? Here's a Ada, could you say the name of the artist again or spell it? Could you, yeah, Joe, could you
Sorry?
can you type into chat what the name of the artist is who made the film?
Bao Li, I was.
Yeah, if you put it into chat at the bottom of the screen, type it in there. All right, and Joe, there is a question from Daphne saying, thank you, Joe. How do you reach out to museums to arrange the tour of exhibits you've curated? Curious how that works.
How do I reach out to, for example, like the Panos Miklos exhibition to Museo Marco Monterrey? It was approached by the director Diana, because she has also been observing Panos Miklos research project for a long time. And the exhibition she came here to see, she started a project space in the museum, which supporting the emerging artist collective and independent spaces. So, which in terms of the body of the institution is kind of being targeting, and also in terms of the subject, I think to talk about the water issue environment is also very, very crucial for the city of Monterrey there, because they have been suffering more severe water shortage than Mexico City since recent years. And it's always been an issue, and also because I think the more difficult part to really say is they do not having short of the water, but the water has been privileged used for the industrial, like Coca-Cola factory, rather than giving to domestic use. So this kind of subject is also, I assume, is a burning issue for the city. So that's why the museum director being interesting and would like to traveling the project and she's also interested to approaching out the project and the artists from outside the city. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay, so thank you, Joe, for the public presentation, and now we'll end and we'll jump on to the next link just with the students.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. See you in a minute.
See you.